house sealed from within. Yet someone was murdered. Welcome to Shadow Deduction. I am your host, Cluecraft. Tell me where you're watching from in the comments. I appreciate every one of you here. Let's unlock the truth. It was on an evening of relentless rain, of the kind that turns polished London streets into blurred reflections of gaslight, that the affair first began. The house stood in dignified silence at the edge of a fashionable square, its tall Georgian windows shuttered against the storm. It was a residence known for discretion and cultivated gatherings, an address where cabinet ministers dined beside celebrated pianists, and fortunes shifted hands as gracefully as crystal champagne flutes. Yet on this particular night, the house had done something quite extraordinary. It had locked itself from the inside. The body was discovered shortly after 11. A butler of nearly 30 years' service, whose loyalty was as impeccable as his white gloves, had grown concerned when his employer failed to descend for coffee. The guests waited awkwardly in the drawing room, their laughter thinning into polite murmurs as minutes passed. A knock at the study door yielded no reply. The handle refused to turn. The key, as later attested, remained firmly in the lock. On the inside, the windows were bolted, the fireplace cold, the sole entrance guarded by a heavy oak door that would not yield. When the door was finally forced open, splintering inward beneath the butler's trembling shoulder and a footman's assistance, they found their host lying across his writing desk. He had been shot once through the chest. No weapon lay near him. The rain lashed at the windows as though demanding entry. Thunder rolled overhead like distant artillery, and the house, immaculate, orderly, silent, offered no explanation. Sir Alistair Wycliffe had been a man of considerable wealth and influence, a collector of rare antiquities and a patron of the arts. He possessed that particular confidence common to men who believed themselves untouchable. He was neither universally admired nor openly despised, an arrangement he seemed to consider ideal. Present that evening were 5 guests, each personally invited for what Sir Alistair had cryptically described as a matter requiring discretion. They were Mrs. Eleanor Ashcombe, a widow of refined bearing whose late husband had once been Sir Alistair's closest business associate; Mr. Julian Carrington, a celebrated architect responsible for several of the city's grandest townhouses, including, intriguingly, Sir Alistair's own; Miss Lydia Vale, a young pianist under Sir Alistair's patronage, her talent rivaled only by her precarious financial situation; Dr. Matthew Harrow, a physician and long-time friend of the deceased, known for his calm temperament; Mr. Frederick Dale, Sir Alistair's private secretary, pale and meticulous, who claimed to know the household's affairs better than any living soul. 5 guests, 1 locked room, no weapon, no apparent means of escape. Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard arrived within the hour, soaked to the bone and visibly irritated by the weather. "A tidy little impossibility," he muttered, surveying the study with a skeptical eye. "Locked from the inside, you say? Windows secure? Or no hidden passageways?" "None, sir," the butler confirmed, wringing his hands. Japp knelt beside the body. "Gunshot wound. Powder burns suggest close range. Yet there's no pistol." He stood, brushing off his knees. "Unless our victim shot himself and then made the weapon vanish out of courtesy, I'd say someone's playing games." He cast his gaze around the room, lingering on the neat rows of books, the symmetrical arrangement of paperweights, the perfectly aligned blotter upon the desk. Everything in its place, everything deliberate. Outside, lightning split the sky. Inside, 5 guests waited, each claiming ignorance, each visibly shaken, yet none so shaken as to forget their composure entirely. And somewhere in the city, at that precise moment, a small, impeccably groomed Belgian gentleman was adjusting his tie before a mirror. Captain Hastings would later recall that Hercule Poirot received the telephone call with an expression not of surprise, but of quiet satisfaction. A locked room, you say? Poirot murmured, his voice purring with interest. Ah, but of course. The universe, it adores symmetry. When something appears impossible, mon ami, it is merely because we have not yet understood its design. Hastings, who had been in the midst of buttering toast, stared. You mean to say you're pleased about it? Pleased? Poirot smiled faintly. No, I am intrigued. He selected his hat with care. A house that locks itself from the inside. It suggests intelligence, does it not? Intent. Order. His dark eyes gleamed. And where there is order, there is also the possibility of vanity. Vanity? Yes. The murderer wishes to demonstrate cleverness. That is always a weakness. He tapped his temple lightly. The little grey cells, Hastings. They will not be deceived by theatrics. Outside, the rain continued its relentless descent. Within the elegant study of Sir Alister Wycliffe, the air still carried the faint scent of gunpowder and polished wood. 5 suspects sat beneath the watchful eyes of Inspector Japp, each nursing private fears. For although the door had been locked, the truth was not, and Hercule Poirot was already on his way. Poirot arrived at the house in the square a little after 1 o'clock in the morning, the rain still clinging to the street lamps and the paving stones like a malicious glaze. He stepped from the cab with the precise care of a man who disapproves of dampness as a personal insult, and Hastings followed, collar turned up, shoes already ruined. Inspector Japp met them at the door with an expression that was half relief and half resignation. "Glad you could come, Poirot," he said, lowering his voice as though the very bricks might listen. "It's a queer one. Locked room, no weapon, 5 people in the drawing room looking like they've swallowed their own secrets." Poirot removed his gloves slowly, as if the act itself were a kind of ceremony. "You have preserved the scene exactly, I hope." "As exactly as you'd want," Japp grunted. "No one's been back into the study except me and the doctor." Poirot's eyes flicked to the butler, who stood rigidly in the hall, hands clenched together until the knuckles shone. The man's gaze clung to Poirot as though to a life raft. "You are Mr. Graves, sir. Thomas Graves. I've served Sir Alister for 29 years. "And you found him?" "Yes, monsieur. When he did not come down, and the guests had waited, I went up, as I always do at 11:30, to ask if coffee should be served. He did not answer. The door would not open." Poirot nodded, absorbing each syllable. "The key was in the lock." "Yes, sir. On the inside." Poirot's mouth pursed slightly, like a man tasting a wine he suspects has been tampered with. "Good. We shall see." He moved toward the study with a little sideways tilt of the head, already listening to the house. Hastings had learned, through many cases, that Poirot did not merely look at a room. He allowed it to speak, not with sounds, but with its silences and its arrangement. Japp pushed the door wider. The forced entry had left ugly splinters around the frame. Now the lock itself looked bruised. Poirot's gaze lingered on that damage, not with pity for the wood, but with interest, as though examining a wound. Inside, the study smelled faintly of smoke, leather bindings, and something sharper. Gunpowder, yes, but old gunpowder, as if it had already begun to settle into the fabric of the room. Sir Alister Wycliffe lay across the desk, his upper body collapsed forward, one arm hanging down, fingers almost brushing the carpet. The lamp on the desk burned low, casting a soft circle of yellow light that made the dead man's face appear strangely peaceful. The chair behind him had been pushed back at an angle, as though he had risen abruptly, or been struck while half standing. Dr. Harrow, tall and composed, stood nearby with his hands folded in front of him. "Time of death?" Poirot asked. "I turn within the last 2 hours," Harrow replied. "The body was still warm when we found him. Shot through the chest at close range. He would have died quickly." Poirot looked, not at the wound first, but at the deceased's cuffs, the fall of his collar, the set of his tie. "And yet he did not fall to the floor immediately," he murmured. "He remained here, across the desk. Interesting." Japp pointed toward the lock. Key's gone now, of course. I took it out to examine. It was an ordinary key. No trick mechanism. No second door. Poirot's eyes drifted to the windows, tall, elegant, each secured with a brass latch. The curtains were drawn halfway, creating narrow slits of darkness beyond. No weapon, Japp added, with the stubborn irritation of a man who disliked mysteries that mocked him. Poirot said nothing at first. He walked around the desk, careful not to disturb the scattered papers. Then he stopped, and his gaze fixed on a small object near the edge of the blotter, a silver paperweight shaped like a classical bust. It sat perfectly aligned with the blotter's corner, as though it had been placed by a ruler. Poirot's fingers hovered over it but did not touch. Sir Alistair liked order. "He did," Graves said, almost fiercely. "Everything had its place." "And tonight," Poirot murmured, "someone has used his love of order against him." Hastings shifted uneasily. "Poirot, surely you don't mean—" "I mean nothing yet," Poirot said softly. "I observe." He turned suddenly to the fireplace. The grate was clean, no ash, no recent soot, the logs unburned. Still, Poirot bent, peering into it as though expecting to find a confession tucked among the coals. Nothing, so he straightened again and looked at the doorframe, the splintered wood. His expression remained polite, but his eyes sharpened. "The door was forced inward," he said. "Yes," Japp replied. "Graves and one of the footmen threw their weight against it." Poirot nodded. "So, the key was in the lock on the inside, preventing entry. Yet now it is outside. It is possible to remove a key from the outside with certain methods, but not without leaving a trace, yes? A scratch, a mark, a disturbance. You see any?" Japp hesitated. "No, not that I can find." Poirot's gaze fell to the lock again. "Then perhaps," he said gently, "we are looking in the wrong direction." Hastings frowned. "Wrong direction?" "Everyone says the door was locked from the inside, therefore the murderer must have been inside. But the murderer wishes you to think this. The murderer arranges the facts so that you will chase your own tail." Poirot's voice became almost tender. "A locked door is not a miracle, Hastings. It is a performance." Japp folded his arms. "All right, if it's a performance, what's the trick?" Poirot's eyes moved to the desk again, to the dead man's hand, to the papers beneath his chest. Then, slowly, he reached for a sheet that protruded from under Sir Alistair's sleeve. He lifted it delicately, as though extracting a card from a magician's deck. There was writing, short lines, neat and sharply angled. Poirot did not read it aloud. He merely looked, his face becoming very still. "What is it?" Hastings asked. "A list," Poirot said quietly, returning the paper to its place. "Or perhaps an accounting. Sir Alistair was expecting something tonight. Something he did not wish to discuss downstairs." Japp's brows rose. "You think it's motive?" "It is the beginning of motive," Poirot corrected. "Motives are not born in the instant of murder. They are carried, like stones, in the pocket." Poirot stepped back and gestured lightly toward the doorway. "Now, let us see the stones each person carries." They found the suspects gathered in the drawing room under the glow of a chandelier that made everything look too civilized for death. A fire crackled in the hearth. The scent of brandy hung in the air. Yet the atmosphere was rigid, strained like a string pulled too tight. Mrs. Ashcombe sat upright on a settee, gloved hands folded as though at church. Julian Carrington paced near the window, his fingers moving restlessly along the seam of his coat. Miss Lydia Vale was perched on the edge of an armchair, a white handkerchief crushed in her fist. Frederick Dale, the secretary, stood with his back against the mantel, eyes flicking like a cornered animal. Dr. Harrow remained near the doorway, calm, perhaps too calm. Poirot entered with a small bow, as if arriving at a soirée rather than a tragedy. "Mesdames, messieurs," he said, voice smooth as polished mahogany, I am Hercule Poirot. You have had, I think, a most unpleasant evening." Carrington stopped pacing, staring. "Poirot, they sent for you." "I came," Poirot said simply, and turned his head toward Japp. "Inspector, with your permission, I will speak to each of them, alone." Japp's mouth tightened, but he nodded. "All right, one by one." Poirot looked at the group again, and his smile was courteous, almost kind. "Now do not be afraid," he said, and Hastings felt, with a small chill, that Poirot's words were not reassurance but a test. "I am not interested in your innocence. I'm interested in your truth." A faint sound escaped Miss Vale. Half-breath, half-stifled sob. Dale's fingers curled tighter around the glass he held, though he did not drink. Mrs. Ashcombe's chin lifted by a fraction, as though offended at the implication that truth might be negotiable. Poirot inclined his head. "Mrs. Ashcombe, you will be first, if you please." As she rose, Hastings saw it clearly, the momentary flicker in her eyes. Not grief, not shock, but calculation. It was gone almost at once, replaced by composed dignity. Poirot watched that flicker as though he had been waiting for it. And somewhere in the quiet, beneath the rain and the crackling fire, the house seemed to tighten around them, like a fist that had not yet fully closed. Poirot did not take Mrs. Ashcombe back into the drawing-room. Instead, he led her into a small morning parlour adjacent to the hall, a quieter space, its furniture protected under pale covers, as though the household preferred to keep certain rooms untouched by daily life. A single lamp burned there, making the shadows long and gentle. Hastings followed, as he always did, and Japp remained at the door with that air of a man forced to tolerate methods he did not entirely approve of. Mrs. Ashcombe sat with care, smoothing her skirt before she placed her hands together in her lap. Her face was composed, but the pulse at her throat beat a little too visibly. Poirot settled opposite her, not too close, not too far, but he folded his hands and regarded her as though she were a portrait whose brush strokes might reveal the painter's lies. "You were invited tonight by Sir Alister," Poirot began. "Of course. And you came quickly. I received his note this afternoon. It said the matter was delicate. I assumed it concerned business. What else could it be?" Poirot's eyes narrowed only slightly. "You speak of business as though it is distant from the heart." Mrs. Ashcombe's lips tightened. "My heart has been widowed for 7 years, Monsieur Poirot. I do not confuse emotions with ledgers. And yet your late husband was Sir Alister's associate. There were entanglements." Her gloved fingers pressed together. "There were investments, partnerships. I inherited responsibilities, that is all." Poirot nodded as though accepting the words, and though Hastings knew he accepted only the shape of them, not their substance. "Tell me of the evening," Poirot said. "When you arrived, what did you do?" "We were shown into the drawing-room. The others were there already, except perhaps Miss Vale, who came a few minutes later. Sir Alister did not join us. Mr. Dale told us Sir Alister was in his study and would come down when ready. You waited." "Yes." We spoke politely. Mr. Carrington grew restless. Miss Vale hardly spoke at all. Dr. Harrow tried to lighten the mood, but it was strained. Poirot leaned forward a fraction. "At any point did you leave the drawing-room?" Mrs. Ashcombe looked at him with mild affront. "Certainly not. What reason would I have?" Poirot's voice remained soft. "Sometimes we leave a room without reason. Sometimes we leave because silence becomes intolerable, or because we wish to speak to someone privately." "I spoke to no one privately," she said, a touch too quickly. Hastings saw Poirot's gaze flicker, like a needle finding a thread. "You did not speak to Sir Alister at all tonight," Poirot continued. "I did not see him." "Did you hear him? A voice upstairs, a step, the movement of furniture?" Mrs. Ashcombe hesitated just a moment. "No." Poirot's fingers tapped lightly against each other. Mrs. Ashcombe, you are a woman of intelligence. You understand the value of precision. If I ask you something, I prefer not no as a shield, but no as a fact. Her cheeks colored faintly. Then it is a fact. Poirot inclined his head. Very well. Then let us speak of other facts. Sir Alistair invited you for a delicate matter. What delicate matters are between you and him? There were disagreements, she admitted reluctantly. My husband's estate. Certain assets. Sir Alistair believed he was owed more than the documents suggested. Money. Yes. And did you owe him? Mrs. Ashcombe's eyes flashed. I owed him nothing beyond what the law required. Poirot's smile was almost sympathetic. The law is sometimes a poor accountant of human greed. Japp cleared his throat from the doorway, impatient. Poirot turned back to her. When did you last see Sir Alistair alive? 2 weeks ago, at a gallery opening. And your relationship? Civil, she said, and Hastings knew at once that the word meant cold as ice, but polished. Poirot stood. Thank you, madame. One more question. Sir Alistair had a habit of keeping things in perfect order. So did that habit ever irritate you? For the first time, Mrs. Ashcombe's composure cracked just barely. A small exhale, almost a laugh without humor. He liked everything aligned, every candle, every chair, as though the world might collapse if a vase sat an inch to the left. Poirot nodded. Yes, that is very helpful. As she rose to leave, Poirot's voice stopped her gently. Madame, were you frightened tonight? Mrs. Ashcombe did not turn. One is not frightened of a man like Sir Alistair, she said quietly. One is cautious. And then she was gone. Poirot remained still for a moment after the door closed, as though listening to the echo of her footsteps in the hall. Cautious, he murmured. Not frightened, not regretful. Interesting. Japp stepped fully into the room. Well? Poirot looked at him mildly. She carries stones in her pocket, Inspector, but perhaps not the stone that killed him. Hastings frowned. You don't think she did it? Poirot's eyes warmed with that familiar look, half amusement, half reproach. My friend, I do not think yet. I arrange. I compare. I let the little grey cells play their game. Then who's next? Japp demanded. Poirot's gaze moved toward the hall where Carrington's restless silhouette crossed the drawing-room doorway like a shadow behind glass. The architect, Poirot said. A man who designs rooms knows how they may be used. Carrington came in with the energy of a man who had been caged too long. He did not sit at first, but stood near the window, staring out at the rain as though hoping it might offer him escape. Poirot waited a beat, allowing the silence to press. Mr. Carrington, he said at last, you built Sir Alistair's study. Carrington's shoulders stiffened. I designed the alterations 5 years ago. Not built. The house is older than both of us. Ah, but the alterations. They are always where secrets live, Poirot said lightly. Tell me, are there any hidden passages? Carrington's laugh came too sharp. No, this isn't one of those penny dreadfuls. There's no priest hole, no sliding panel. It's a simple Georgian room. Poirot nodded. Simple is often the most dangerous word. You were restless this evening. Because it was absurd, Carrington snapped. We were made to sit like school children while he played the grand host upstairs. And you wished to leave? I did, yes. Did you try? Poirot asked gently. Carrington hesitated. His hand went to his pocket, then withdrew. The storm was terrible and... He broke off, no lips tightening. And what, monsieur? Carrington's eyes narrowed. And we were asked to stay until Sir Alistair came down. It would have been discourteous. Poirot's tone remained calm. Discourteous is not illegal. Carrington's jaw worked. Fine. I did go to the hall at one point. I asked Graves if Sir Alistair would be much longer. He said Sir Alistair had instructed him not to disturb him. Poirot's eyes sharpened. At what time? Just after 11, 11:10 perhaps. I looked at the clock in the drawing room. And you returned directly? Yes. Poirot stepped closer, his voice dropping. Mr. Carrington, you are an architect. You understand locks. Carrington's laugh was bitter. I understand people who wish to keep other people out. Poirot nodded. Yes, and you understand that a lock can be made to appear secure when it is not. Carrington's gaze darted toward Japp. Are you accusing me of something? I accuse no one, Poirot said. I merely ask questions. Because questions are keys, monsieur. They open what is locked. Carrington's breath quickened. If you must know, Sir Alistair had something of mine, something he refused to return. What thing? Carrington's eyes flashed with anger and humiliation. Drawings, plans, my work. He paid me, yes, but he threatened me with them. Poirot's voice became very quiet. Threatened. Carrington swallowed. There was an error, a miscalculation on a project years ago. Nothing that harmed anyone, but it would ruin me if it were known. Sir Alistair, he delighted in having leverage. And tonight, Poirot murmured, see, he summoned you for a delicate matter. Carrington's hands clenched. Yes. And if he intended to ruin you, you would have motive. Carrington's eyes widened. Motive, yes. But I didn't kill him. Poirot studied him, then asked softly, when the door was forced, you were in the drawing room? Yes, with the others. And you saw the shock, the fear. Carrington's voice lowered, almost against his will. Not all of it was fear. Poirot tilted his head. Explain. Carrington hesitated, then said, Dale, the secretary. When Graves said the door wouldn't open, Dale went white. Not like surprise, like recognition, like he already knew what we would find. The words landed in the room like a dropped glass. Poirot did not react outwardly. He simply absorbed it, filed it away. Thank you, he said. That is most useful. When Carrington left, Hastings felt the temperature of the room change, as though the house itself had shifted in response to a new truth. Poirot remained seated, eyes distant. Dale went white, he repeated softly. Japp rubbed his jaw. Dale's a nervous sort. Poirot looked at him, calm and unblinking. There is nervousness, Inspector, and there is anticipation. They are not the same. Hastings glanced toward the door, imagining the pale secretary by the mantel, clutching his glass. Do you think Dale had the gun? Hastings asked. Poirot's gaze was thoughtful. Perhaps. Or perhaps Dale knows where the gun is. In either case, we shall speak to him next. But before Poirot could rise, there came a quick, urgent knock, and Graves appeared, his face strained. Monsieur Poirot, he said, voice tight, there is something else you must see. Poirot stood at once. Asked, what is it? Graves swallowed. In Sir Alistair's bedroom, one of the drawers has been forced open, and something is missing. Poirot's eyes glittered faintly, as though the rain outside had found its way into them. Ah, he murmured. So the house does not only lock itself from the inside, it also keeps its treasures close. Japp swore under his breath. Robbery on top of murder. Poirot followed Graves out into the hall, footsteps light, precise, and Hastings felt the case tighten again, like the first turn of a screw. Whatever had been missing from that drawer was not an afterthought. It was part of the design. They went upstairs at once, the house seeming to listen to their ascent. The corridor was thickly carpeted, muting their steps, and the lamps along the walls cast an amber glow that softened the severity of the storm outside. But yet there was nothing soft in the tension that now gripped the household. Sir Alistair's bedroom lay at the end of the passage, opposite the study. Graves paused at the threshold, as though reluctant to profane his master's private quarters with further disturbance. "It is here, sir," he said quietly. The room was large, masculine, and as meticulously arranged as the study below. The bed was turned down but untouched. A silver-backed brush lay aligned with a comb upon the dressing table. Even the curtains fell in perfect symmetry. Poirot walked slowly around the space, his gaze moving not to the forced drawer immediately, but to the general harmony of the room. "Sir Alistair retired before joining his guests?" he asked. "No, monsieur," Graves replied. "He remained in his study, and he had not come up yet." "Then why is the bed turned down?" Graves hesitated. "I turned it down at 10, as I always do." Poirot nodded. "Routine? Very good." Japp had already moved to the writing bureau near the window. One of its lower drawers hung slightly crooked, the lock splintered as though pried open in haste. "This wasn't done with subtlety," Japp muttered. "Someone forced it." Poirot crouched before the drawer, examining the fractured wood. He ran a gloved finger lightly along the edge, but did not touch the interior. "What was kept here?" he asked. Graves swallowed. "Sir Alistair's private papers, personal correspondence, certain legal documents. He did not trust the study safe for everything." "And what is missing?" "There was an envelope, monsieur, thick, sealed with red wax, and he placed it there this afternoon." Poirot looked up sharply. "You saw him place it?" "Yes, sir. He asked me to bring the key to the bureau. He unlocked it, put the envelope inside, and locked it again." "And now the key?" Graves' face paled further. "Still on his key ring, in his pocket." Japp straightened. "So whoever opened this didn't have the key. They forced it after he was dead." "Or before," Poirot murmured. Japp frowned. "Before? With 5 guests downstairs?" Poirot's eyes remained on the broken lock. "We assume the timeline is simple because it comforts us, Inspector. But what if the drawer was opened before the shot was fired?" Hastings stared. But why would someone break into the bedroom while Sir Alistair was still alive? "To retrieve something he threatened to reveal," Poirot said softly. Or to remove something that gave him power." He rose and surveyed the room again. There were no signs of struggle, no displaced objects. Everything remained in its strict alignment, save for the damaged drawer. "Graves," Poirot said gently, "did Sir Alistair appear agitated this evening?" The butler considered. "He was composed, monsieur. But there was an intensity about him. He dismissed me earlier than usual and instructed that none of the guests be admitted to the study." "And the envelope?" Poirot prompted. "Did you notice anything about it? Its size? Its weight?" "It was thick, sir. Perhaps several sheets inside. It bore no address." Poirot exchanged a glance with Hastings. A thick envelope, sealed, placed carefully away only hours before death. And now gone. Japp exhaled sharply. "So we've got blackmail, then? Is that what you're thinking?" Poirot did not answer at once. He stepped to the dressing table and adjusted, almost absent-mindedly, the angle of the silver brush so that it aligned perfectly with its companion. Only when he was satisfied did he speak. "I think Sir Alistair summoned his guests tonight not for dinner, but for judgment." "Judgment?" Hastings echoed. "Yes. He held something over at least one of them, perhaps over several. An envelope containing proof. And someone, knowing this, removed it." Japp crossed his arms. "And then shot him." "Perhaps," Poirot said. "Or perhaps the shooting was inevitable once the envelope was taken." Hastings felt a chill. "You mean Sir Alistair discovered the theft?" "Imagine," Poirot said quietly, "a man who thrives on control, who arranges his world as neatly as his desk. And if he discovers that his power, his secret weapon, has vanished, would he remain calm?" Japp's brows lifted. "You think there was an argument?" "I think," Poirot replied, "there was confrontation." They descended again to the lower floor, where the suspects still waited, their composure thinning with each passing minute. Word of the forced draw had already spread. Whispers flickered like moths in the lamplight. Frederick Dale stood apart now, no longer leaning against the mantel but pacing slowly near the doorway. His pale face had grown almost translucent. Poirot approached him without preamble. "Mr. Dale," he said softly, "you assisted Sir Alistair with his correspondence." "Yes. You were aware of a sealed envelope placed in the bedroom bureau this afternoon." Dale's lips parted. For a moment, no sound emerged. Then, "Sir, I was not told what it contained." "But you knew of it?" "Yes. And you did not think it unusual that Sir Alistair would lock it away upstairs rather than in his study?" Dale swallowed. "He sometimes did so with sensitive documents." Poirot watched him closely. "Sensitive to whom?" To those concerned." A faint tremor entered Dale's voice. His eyes flicked toward the others, then back to Poirot. "Mr. Dale," Poirot continued gently, "when Graves announced that the study door would not open, you turned pale." Dale stiffened. "Anyone would." "Not quite as you did," Carrington's voice interjected sharply from across the room. All eyes turned. Poirot did not rebuke the interruption. Instead, he allowed it to settle like dust. "Tell me, Mr. Dale," Poirot said. "What did you expect to find when that door was forced?" Dale's hands clenched at his sides. I feared something had happened." "Because?" "Because Sir Alistair was not a man who ignored his guests," Dale said, desperation edging his tone. "If he did not come down, something was wrong." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Or because you knew that something was about to be revealed?" Dale recoiled as though struck. "No!" The denial rang too loud in the room. Miss Vale let out a small cry, pressing her handkerchief to her lips. Dr. Harrow stepped forward as though to steady her, but she shrank slightly from his touch. Poirot noticed. He noticed everything. "Inspector," Poirot said calmly, "before we continue the interviews, I would like to see the keyring taken from Sir Alistair's pocket." Japp hesitated, and then nodded and left briefly for the study. The room felt suspended in his absence. Poirot moved to the fireplace, warming his hands though the fire burned steadily. His voice, when he spoke again, was almost conversational. "You see, mes amis, the envelope is missing. The drawer is forced. The door to the study was locked from the inside. But these are facts only on the surface." He turned, eyes bright. "The true question is not who could have entered or exited the study." A pause. "It is who needed that envelope more than they feared a locked door." Japp returned, holding the keyring. Poirot accepted it delicately, examining each key in turn. "Study, bureau, front door, side entrance, all present. No key is missing," Poirot murmured. Hastings frowned. "But if the bureau key was on the ring, and the drawer was forced, then the person who opened it did not have access to the ring at that moment," Poirot finished softly. His gaze lifted slowly, deliberately, until it rested on Frederick Dale. "Unless," Poirot added, "the ring was not always in Sir Alistair's pocket this evening." The silence that followed was not empty. It was charged. And in that silence, a new possibility began to form, like a shadow stretching long across the polished floor. Frederick Dale seemed to shrink beneath Poirot's steady gaze, as though the very air had grown too heavy for him to bear. "I do not understand what you imply," he said, though the faint tremor in his voice betrayed him. Poirot turned the key ring slowly between his fingers, letting the small metallic chime punctuate the silence. "You assisted Sir Alistair daily," Poirot said mildly. You handled his correspondence, his appointments, his private papers. It would not be unusual for him to entrust you with his keys from time to time." Dale hesitated. "Occasionally." "Yes." "Tonight," Dale swallowed. Earlier, yes. When he asked me to fetch a document from the study safe. And afterward? I returned them to him. When? Before the guests arrived. Poirot tilted his head. You are certain? Yes. Inspector Japp stepped forward. What time did the guests arrive, roughly? Shortly after 10, Mrs. Ashcombe replied coolly. We were all present by 10:15. And Sir Alistair? Poirot asked. He remained upstairs, Dale said quickly. He said he would join us when ready. Upstairs, Poirot repeated thoughtfully. In the study. He moved closer to Dale, not aggressively, but with quiet inevitability. You say you returned the keys before 10:15. Yet at some point after that, an envelope was placed in the bureau upstairs. Graves saw Sir Alistair lock it away. Yes, which means Sir Alistair must have had the keys in his possession after 10:15. Dale nodded, though his eyes darted nervously. Poirot's voice remained calm. At what time did you last see Sir Alistair alive? Dale hesitated longer this time. About 10:30, he said finally. He called me into the study. Briefly. The admission caused a ripple in the room. You did not mention this before, Japp said sharply. You did not ask, Dale protested. Poirot's expression did not change. Why did he summon you? He wished to confirm that all guests had arrived. He seemed impatient. And did you discuss the envelope? No. But you knew it existed? Yes. And you did not attempt to persuade him against whatever course he intended? Dale's composure cracked slightly. It was not my place. Poirot studied him for a long moment, then shifted his attention to the others. Did any of you see Mr. Dale leave the drawing room around 10:30? There was hesitation. Then Miss Vale spoke softly. I remember Mr. Dale being absent for a few minutes. I thought he had gone to speak with Sir Alistair. Carrington nodded reluctantly. He wasn't there when I asked the butler about the delay. Mrs. Ashcombe remained silent, though her eyes flicked briefly toward Dale. Poirot folded his hands again. So, at 10:30, Mr. Dale enters the study. Sir Alistair is alive. Now the envelope has already been placed in the bureau. The keys are in Sir Alistair's possession. Mr. Dale leaves shortly thereafter and rejoins the guests. Yes, Dale said, voice strained. After that, Poirot continued, no one admits to leaving the drawing room, except Mr. Carrington briefly stepping into the hall around 11:10. Carrington stiffened. I did not go upstairs. I did not say you did, Poirot replied gently. The clock on the mantel ticked loudly in the silence that followed. Graves, Poirot said, at what time did you attempt to enter the study? 11:25, sir, when Sir Alistair did not come down. And you had heard no shot? No, monsieur. The storm was loud. The guests were speaking. Poirot nodded slowly. Then the shot could have been fired any time between 10:30 and 11:25. Japp exhaled. Nearly an hour. An hour in which, Poirot added softly, 5 people waited for a man who intended to confront one or more of them. He turned again to Dale. When you left the study at 10:30, how was Sir Alistair disposed? Seated at his desk, Dale replied. Writing something. The list, Hastings murmured involuntarily. Poirot's eyes flicked to him briefly, but he did not elaborate. Did he appear angry? Poirot asked. Not angry, determined. And armed? Poirot's tone was light, almost idle. Dale blinked. Armed? Did you see a pistol? No. Poirot inclined his head. Mr. Dale, he said softly, if Sir Alistair intended to confront someone with evidence contained in that envelope, he would not have required a pistol. The power was already his. Dale said nothing. And yet, Poirot continued, the envelope is gone, the drawer forced, the keys returned to his pocket, the door locked from the inside, no weapon. He paced slowly across the drawing room, each step measured, The simplest explanation would be this. One of you left the drawing room, went upstairs, forced the bureau, took the envelope, confronted Sir Alistair in the study, shot him, and arranged the locked room illusion. Japp nodded. That's about the size of it. But, Poirot said quietly, the simplicity is deceptive. He stopped beside the fireplace. To leave the drawing room unnoticed for such a length of time would be difficult. There were only 5 of you. The absence of one would be remarked. Carrington crossed his arms. We weren't counting heads. No, Poirot agreed. But tension sharpens observation. Miss Vale shifted in her chair, her knuckles white around her handkerchief. Poirot's gaze rested on her briefly, then moved on. There is another possibility, he said slowly. Japp frowned. Which is? That the theft of the envelope and the murder did not occur in the order we assume. Hastings blinked. You mean? I mean, Poirot said, voice lowering. What if the envelope was taken earlier, before 10:30? Dale stared. That is impossible. Sir Alistair placed it in the bureau at some point in the afternoon, Poirot finished. But who saw him lock it? Graves, Dale said. Yes. And did you, Mr. Dale, at any time have access to the bureau key earlier today? Dale's face drained of color. Only briefly, he whispered. When he asked me to retrieve another document. And while you had the key, Poirot said gently, it would have been possible to open the bureau. Dale shook his head violently. I did not. Poirot's expression remained unreadable. If the envelope were removed before the guests arrived, he continued, then tonight's gathering becomes something else entirely. Something else? Mrs. Ashcombe asked coolly. A trap, Poirot said. The word hung in the air. If Sir Alistair believed he possessed incriminating evidence, Poirot went on, he might summon those concerned, but if that evidence were already gone, then he would confront them without his shield. Hastings felt the logic tightening, like a net being drawn. You think he discovered the envelope was missing before 10:30? Hastings said slowly. Precisely, Poirot replied. And in discovering it, he realized that someone among his guests had anticipated him. Japp rubbed his chin. So he calls Dale up at 10:30 because he suspects him. Perhaps, Poirot said, or perhaps Dale was merely the first he chose to test. All eyes turned again to the secretary. Dale's breathing had grown shallow. I did not take it, he insisted. I swear. Poirot's voice softened. Then tell me, monsieur, when you were alone in the study at 10:30, did Sir Alistair accuse you of anything? Dale's lips parted. He hesitated, and in that hesitation lay something far more telling than denial. Yes, he said finally, barely audible. He asked me if I had been in his bedroom. The room seemed to tilt. And what did you answer? Poirot asked. I said no. Was it the truth? Dale closed his eyes briefly. Yes, he whispered. Poirot regarded him for a long moment. And what did Sir Alistair do then? Dale's voice faltered. He dismissed me, but he looked at me as though he did not believe me. Poirot nodded slowly. So by 10:30, Sir Alistair already knew the envelope was gone. The implications rippled outward, which meant the theft had occurred before that hour, which meant the murderer may not have needed to break the bureau after the shot at all. Poirot turned toward the staircase, his expression thoughtful, almost serene. The house, he said softly, did not lock itself. It was locked by a mind that wished to simplify what was, in truth, far more complex. He looked back at them, eyes gleaming faintly. And now, mes amis, we must determine who among you had the foresight to steal power before it could be used. The storm outside intensified, the wind striking the windows like impatient fingers. Inside, the circle of suspicion tightened, and though no weapon had yet been found, the true weapon, knowledge, had already begun to change hands long before the shot was fired. The following evening, at Poirot's quiet but unmistakable insistence, the surviving players in Sir Alistair Wickliffe's final drama gathered once more in the drawing-room of the house that had so obstinately locked itself from the inside. The storm had passed. The square lay washed and subdued beyond the tall windows, as though London itself wished to distance its conscience from what had occurred. Inside, however, nothing had softened. Mrs. Ashcombe sat upright, composed but pale. Carrington stood near the mantel, restless energy suppressed by visible effort. Miss Vale looked fragile, her eyes shadowed by sleeplessness. Dr. Harrow remained outwardly calm. Frederick Dale seemed diminished, as though each passing hour had carved something from him. Inspector Japp stood near the door, arms folded. Poirot alone appeared entirely at ease. He adjusted a small vase on the side table by a fraction of an inch before turning to face them. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began gently, "we are here to conclude what Sir Alistair began." No one spoke. "He summoned you because he believed he possessed power over at least one among you. That power was contained in a sealed envelope. The envelope disappeared before 10:30 that evening. By 10:30, Sir Alistair knew it was gone. He let that settle. At that moment, the balance of power shifted. The hunter realized he had become vulnerable. Carrington shifted. "It's your saying whoever stole the envelope had already beaten him." "In part," Poirot replied, "but theft alone does not explain murder." He began to walk slowly, hands clasped behind his back. "Let us consider the locked room. The study door was locked from the inside. The key in the lock. Windows secured. No weapon found." He turned, eyes bright. "Such arrangements are theatrical. They are meant to guide the mind toward impossibility." Japp grunted softly. "Get on with it, Poirot." Poirot inclined his head. "Very well. The key was in the lock when the door was forced, yet no mechanism allowed it to be turned from outside. Therefore, the door was locked from the inside after the murderer had already ensured there would be no need to leave." Silence. Hastings felt the tension rising like a held breath. "You see," Poirot continued, "Sir Alistair was not shot by someone fleeing the room." He looked directly at Dr. Harrow. "He was shot by someone he trusted enough to turn his back upon." Miss Vale gasped faintly. Dr. Harrow did not move. Poirot's voice remained calm, almost kind. "The powder burns indicated close range. The wound suggests Sir Alistair was either rising from his chair or already partially turned when the shot was fired. There was no sign of struggle, no defensive wound." He took one small step closer. "And there was something else. A detail small, but decisive." Japp frowned. "What detail?" "When I first entered the study," Poirot said, "I observed that Sir Alistair's desk was in perfect order, except for one thing. The silver paperweight was aligned precisely with the blotter's corner. Too precisely." Carrington blinked. "So?" "So," Poirot said softly. "But if Sir Alistair had just discovered the loss of his envelope and confronted someone, if he had been agitated, would he have paused to adjust a paperweight into perfect alignment?" No one answered. "He would not," Poirot continued, "but someone else would." His gaze remained fixed on Dr. Harrow. "You are a man of composure, Doctor. Of control. You dislike disorder." Dr. Harrow's lips curved faintly. "That is hardly a crime." "No," Poirot agreed, "but it is a signature." Hastings felt a sudden clarity descending. "You mean after the shot?" "Yes," Poirot said. "After the shot, the murderer remained in the room long enough to straighten the desk, to restore symmetry, because disorder offends him." The room seemed to shrink. Dr. Harrow spoke at last, his tone steady. "You build much upon psychology, Monsieur Poirot." "I build upon consistency," Poirot replied, "and upon opportunity." He turned to the others briefly. Who could enter the study without arousing alarm? Who could plausibly check on Sir Alistair if he delayed? A physician, a friend. Miss Vale stared at Harrow, horror dawning. "You went upstairs," she whispered. Dr. Harrow did not look at her. "Yes," he said calmly. "I did." A collective intake of breath followed. Poirot nodded once. "You went after 10:30, after Mr. Dale had been dismissed. You knew of the envelope. You feared its contents." Carrington's voice cut in sharply. "The envelope concerned you?" Harrow's composure cracked just slightly. "It concerned many of us," he said. "Sir Alistair had invested recklessly. He knew things, financial improprieties, and discreet matters." "Medical improprieties?" Poirot asked softly. Harrow's eyes flashed. Yes." The truth landed heavily. "You had altered records," Poirot continued. "Adjusted reports. Nothing fatal, but damaging if revealed." Harrow said nothing. "You learned earlier that afternoon, through observation, through conversation, that Sir Alistair intended to confront one of you. You suspected it might be you, so you removed the envelope before he could use it." "And the drawer?" Japp demanded. "I forced it later," Harrow replied coolly, "to create confusion, to suggest theft after death." Miss Vale let out a soft sob. "But you did not anticipate," Poirot continued, "that Sir Alistair would notice its absence so quickly. He summoned Mr. Dale, tested him, realized betrayal was close at hand." Harrow's jaw tightened. "So you went upstairs under pretense of concern, perhaps even of assistance." Harrow's voice was steady again. "He accused me, without proof. He threatened ruin. And so," Poirot said gently, "you ended the threat." "Yes." The word was quiet, final. Japp stepped forward immediately. "Dr. Matthew Harrow, I'm placing you under arrest." Harrow raised a hand. "There is no need for drama, Inspector." His gaze moved once around the room. To Miss Vale, who looked away, to Carrington, to Mrs. Ashcombe. "I did what was necessary," he said. "Sir Alistair thrived on control. He destroyed lives for sport." "And you?" Poirot asked softly. "Did you restore balance?" Harrow met his eyes. "I restored silence." Poirot's expression held neither triumph nor condemnation. "No, monsieur," he said quietly. "You restored nothing, and you merely rearranged the disorder." Japp led Harrow toward the door. As it closed behind them, the house seemed to exhale. The remaining guests sat in stunned stillness. Mrs. Ashcombe spoke first, her voice thin. "And the locked door?" Poirot allowed himself the faintest smile. "After the shot, Dr. Harrow locked the study door from inside. Then he exited through the French window to the small balcony adjoining the bedroom corridor. It is accessible, though rarely used. The rain concealed sound. He re-entered the house through the bedroom, forced the bureau drawer to suggest robbery, and returned downstairs before suspicion fully formed." Carrington stared. "But the balcony door was bolted?" "From inside the bedroom," Poirot said, "which the doctor secured upon re-entry. A simple slide latch. The one that can be drawn closed behind oneself with a cord." Hastings exhaled in admiration. "Everything arranged," Poirot said softly. "Everything symmetrical." Miss Vale wiped her eyes. "And the envelope?" Poirot's gaze drifted toward the window. "It will be found," he said calmly. "Hidden, perhaps burned. But its contents are no longer power." Silence settled gently now, no longer charged but hollow. Poirot adjusted his cuffs. "You see," he said quietly, "the house did not lock itself from the inside. It was locked by pride, by fear, by the illusion of control." He turned toward the hall. As always, it was not the walls that held the secret. It was the human heart. Hastings followed him out into the cool evening air. The square was quiet, clean. "Well done, Poirot," he said warmly. Poirot smiled faintly, adjusting his hat. "My friend, As when a room is locked, one must not ask only how it was closed. He glanced back once at the silent house. One must ask, who believed they could keep the truth from escaping? And with that, Hercule Poirot walked away, leaving behind a house no longer locked, yet forever altered by what had once been hidden inside.